Hello artists! Today I'm going to be talking to you about Cubism, which is something some of you may have heard of before and some of you may not be familiar with. In this unit we're going to learn some facts about Pablo Picasso, who was a very famous Cubist artist. We're going to be sharing our work, so we'll talk a little bit about critique on feedback, and we're going to be creating portraits using this Cubist style. So Pablo Picasso was an artist who was born in Spain quite a while ago in 1881, and he died a few years before I was born in 1973, and you can see this is a picture of him, a black and white picture right there. He began drawing when he was pretty young, 7 years old. His father was an art teacher, and he is the most famous artist of the 20th century, probably. A lot of people are familiar with his work. His work appears in museums and in buildings and just different establishments all over the world. Again, he started from Spain, but we have a lot of really amazing Picasso pieces around the U.S. And he actually has 3 museums dedicated exclusively to his work. So this is an example of Picasso's work right here. Of one of his Cubist portraits. So you can see this does not look like photorealism, doesn't look like a photograph. In this picture, Picasso broke the face up into smaller pieces, showing different parts and different sides of the face at the same time. So you see the face from different perspectives, which means you kind of see the side of the eye, but also the eye as if it were looking straight towards the viewer. You see the nose from one side and kind of the chin and the mouth and the lower part of the face from the other. So you can see that it shows you different parts of the face kind of broken up into different pieces or sometimes cubes, which is where it got its name, Cubism. Even though the pieces that you can see Picasso used to break up his compositions weren't always cubes or squares. A lot of them were geometric shapes, and some of them weren't actually cubes or squares. And he used this to show his subjects from different points of view. This is another example of his work here. And I really like this one, both because of the really strong black lines, which I think are really nice, and also the colors. A couple more examples here. And these are all portraits, which means these are artworks that are showing a person, and one person usually as the focal point. Although sometimes you probably have heard the term family portraits, which is when you have a portrait with more than one subject, more than one person in the composition. You can see these faces are broken up again. You're seeing things from different viewpoints, not necessarily cubes or blocks, but at least in the case of the picture on the right, some geometric shapes, so some really hard lines, sharp kind of angles. And you can see those sharp angles and the hard lines are really prominent in these 2 pieces as well. And at the time, I think Picasso, when he first started painting this way, some people didn't quite understand it. And abstraction was kind of, at least compared to now, sort of in its infancy. A lot of people were still painting things very realistically, but these are quite different. And I think it's the reason he became as well known as he is today. This is another example of his work. This is not a portrait. This is a still life, so you can look at this and kind of tell what some elements are. You might see a knife there, you might see a guitar there, or a book, or a piece of fruit. If you look more carefully, you might see that all these objects and a couple others are on a table. And this is another still life, so it's showing still objects. It's not showing a portrait or a human. And this, you can see, is prominently fruit, but you can also see some things kind of blended into the background a little bit, like a vase, some other things that if you look carefully you might see. Now, while Picasso pioneered Cubism, he's certainly not the only artist who works with Cubism. This is an example of a portrait done with, you can see very, very literally cubes or squares and rectangles. And it's a portrait of a person, but it's done in photography. So you can see certain shots are from the side of the face. Ones are close up of maybe the side of the eye or the side of the cheek or shoulder. And some of them are a little bit further back. And you can see that this artist took all those photos and combined them together to create a portrait where you are seeing things kind of from a Cubist perspective, so seeing things from different perspectives. And I think it's an interesting way of interpreting Cubism. This is another piece. You can see literally using cubes or, blocks, squares, rectangles, and looking at this one person from different perspectives. From the side, 3/4 view, and then placed all together in a collage that shows you kind of a multifaceted look at the subject. Here's one more, and this one is arranged. These are also, squares in their photographs. You can see in the man on the left, you can see his face from different perspectives. The man on the right, you can see some parts of his body from different perspectives, but not his face. And these photos are arranged in a grid pattern. Kind of an interesting interpretation. And then here's one more. So you can see this is a portrait of a person, but it also kind of includes the person's legs and hand to the person who was taking the photos, the artist. Sometimes artists do self-portraits, so pictures of themselves, or they include parts of themselves in different artworks that they might do. And you can see this is not in the grid. It's kind of, organically placed together, and you can see some of the background where this person is sitting to a little bit of the outside of the landscape. And these photographic pieces are going to serve as your inspiration for your piece. So what I want you to do is I want you to think about different perspectives, different ways you can take your own pictures. So these are going to be self-portraits. And then I want you to combine your pictures together. You can take your picture with your iPad. You can combine them together there are lots of different apps that can do it. One that is on your iPad right now is Sketch School. It's certainly not the only app you can use, but I want you to take a number of photos and combine them so that you are creating your own Cubist self-portrait. And that is your assignment for today. All right, have fun.